Just checking that you can hear me, and I think we're ready to make a start. One moment, please. Hello. Apologies, everyone, for the lateness in joining you. I think we'll make a start now. Can I welcome all members and officers to this meeting of Cabinet, which, due to government advice and to practice social distancing, will be held virtually. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations, apart from myself. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all of the times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. If any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen hand at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window. I'll come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before we formally commence, I will now ask the officer from Democratic Services to announce the names of the councillors in attendance at this meeting. Andrew, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Officer. The members present are Councillor Hugh David, Leader, Councillor Howell Williams, Deputy Leader, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Cabinet Member, Social Services and Early Help, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, Cabinet Member, Communities, Councillor Danisha Patel, Cabinet Member, Wellbeing and Future Generations, and Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, that's Councillor Charles Smith. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Andrew. I will also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. Before we proceed to the business on today's agenda, I would respectfully request that we have a minute's silence and a period of quiet reflection following the very sad loss of our colleague and friend, Councillor Phil White, last week. Thank you very much, colleagues. And of course, we will all have an opportunity to pay tribute to Councillor White at tomorrow's full council meeting. I also wish to announce that it has been necessary to change the date of the next meeting of the Cabinet Committee Equalities in November. Please note that the meeting will now be held on Monday the 8th of November and not Thursday the 25th of November as originally scheduled. The starting time of the meeting remains at 10 o'clock. Chairperson, Councillor Pwlb, is in agreement with this change and member invitees on the committee have been notified accordingly. I will now proceed to agenda business. And the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence from members and officers. I don't think we've had any apologies. So we'll now receive any declarations of personal or prejudicial interest from members and officers in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct adopted by this authority in September 2008. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Colleagues, Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I wish to declare personal interest on agenda item 6, the capital programme update. Given my role as Chair of Governors for Abercerdyn Primary as a local education authority appointment. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I need to declare both a personal interest in agenda item number 6 as an LEA appointed Governor of Bryn Teg, but also a prejudicial interest in item 6 as my father is a patron of Bridgend Rugby Athletic Club, which will be benefiting from potentially the monies if agreed. So I will leave the meeting while it's being discussed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Burnett. Deputy Leader, is that a new hand or is that a legacy hand? I have a new hand on my screen.
No, I put my mic off, but I haven't got my hand down the way.
That's okay. I think there are other colleagues that potentially need to make a declaration of interest. But if not, then obviously during the course of the meeting, if a declaration of interest is identified, then please indicate during the meeting. We have the minutes.
Leader, I've got my hand raised.
Yes, sorry.
It's item 6. I'm a governor of Bridgend College, so I've got a personal interest there to be declared. In my head, I've got another one somewhere, but I can't remember what it was, so I might have to declare that when we get to it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. I seem to be having a delayed set of hands raised and lowered on my screen, so I only just had your hand up, and I can see that the Dep's hand is up on my screen, but that may be a legacy hand and may only be on my screen. So we'll move on. I'll move back to the minutes. So we have for approval the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of September. Can I have someone move them as a true and accurate record of the last meeting of Cabinet, please?
Move those, Leader, or second to the Deputy.
I've got a mover and a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Baldwin, all in agreement with that?
Yes, agreed.
Yes. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the first report on today's agenda, and that is the annual report for 2020-2021 is a report of the Chief Executive, but will be presented by the Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. Jill, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, my name's Jill Lewis. I'm the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. What you have in front of you here at Cabinet is the annual report 2020-21, which is at Appendix A. And the purpose of the report is for Cabinet to consider that and recommend it to Council for approval. So just by way of background, the shared purpose, shared future statutory guidance for the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 asks that individual public bodies annually review the progress of their wellbeing objectives and publish a report on how we contribute to the 7 wellbeing goals. Just to remind you that this also under the measure needs to be published by the 31st of October. And so this is the point in the year which Cabinet considers the annual report and sends it to Council for discussion and approval. So the corporate plan was agreed in March 2020 and it was revised because of the pandemic and further approved at Council in September 2020. And that process involved a thorough review of the corporate plan, which you will recall, I'm sure, as members. And we brought through to Council the process where some targets were removed from the corporate plan to allow staff to focus on emergency and urgent issues. And I think it's fair to say that the COVID pandemic created, I think we've used the word so many times, unprecedented challenges. And that had quite a dramatic impact on the way that we did business. So when we set the corporate plan out in March 2020, I don't think we realised quite how much that year would change. And so just to remind Cabinet, this is about the year 2021 and it's a reflection, I think, on that year. So the Council has managed to achieve the corporate plan through enhanced collaboration, partnership working, committed, adaptable and resilient staff. And I think it's fair to say that despite those unprecedented challenges, I think you'll see from the annual report that you have in front of you that there's some huge achievements despite those unprecedented challenges. And of course, we're now planning the recovery from the pandemic and embracing the new ways of delivering services. So just very briefly, of the 32 commitments that we made to support the delivery of our wellbeing objectives, 13 were fully completed and 19 achieved most of the milestones. So again, despite all the difficulties, the focus was still on achieving the services and the service delivery for residents, and indeed achieving more than just the service delivery, additional services and particularly protection for those most vulnerable through the pandemic. And of the 46 indicators, I think it's fair to say 14 were within around about 10% of the target, with 11 missing their target by varying degrees. And all the detail of the achievements are set out in Appendix A, which is, of course, the annual report. So despite the difficulties of the year in question, there's some fantastic achievements. They're set out. I won't go into them in detail. You have the report in front of you at Appendix A, but some great achievements in regeneration, homelessness, managing the vulnerable, and the sustainability, I think, of services for the future. And there are far too many achievements to go through them one by one, but I think it's fair to say that all services stepped up to the plate during this very difficult year. It's an important document, Leader, as it provides citizens and stakeholders with a plethora of detailed information about the Council's performance against the wellbeing objectives and outcomes. And I think I would commend it as an excellent read for those who would like to see just what the Council's been up to for the last year. So I won't go through any more of the detail. I'm happy to take any questions that Cabinet might have. And obviously, if it's recommended today to go forward to Council, I'm sure there'll be opportunities tomorrow to look at some of those fantastic achievements. So thank you. I'll take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Okay, thank you for that, Jill. It is indeed a comprehensive report, and it is a report that highlights many of the achievements that have been realised in the face of unprecedented pressures that have not yet gone away. Indeed, some of those pressures are growing on our services, unfortunately. One question I was going to ask Jill was around the reference, I think it was on page 8, to the levels of satisfaction that people have with their local area as a place to live, and obviously that's an important question and a response to understand from a national survey across Wales. And we've got the line about the number of people who are satisfied. I think it would be useful for members to know the other responses to the survey, because I think that provides important context and to understand how many people were dissatisfied. So that's one question. There's reference in the report to Estin's in inspection and activity of the local authority and how positive that is. And also in the report, there's a section on Care Inspectorate Wales. And of course, we have the annual report, but there's also assurance checks and inspections. And some of these take place within a time scale, and obviously we don't receive immediate feedback on the activity of Care Inspectorate Wales, but I think it's important to reflect on that as well. And I'm also pleased to see reference in the report, obviously, to the important role of overview and scrutiny committees, and to the role also of equality and diversity, and how we're trying to champion that across the organisation. I can see that Councillor Baldwin wants to come in, but before I bring Councillor Baldwin in, would you have more information about the survey, Jill, about satisfaction, about where people live?
Thank you, Leader. I haven't got it to hand today, but I can provide that for members in more detail. And just to pick up the other regulators, you mentioned specifically Estin and CIW. Wherever we can, we will have links to the reports from those regulators. We just need to make sure that that those are translated if they're on our website, to make sure that they're bilingual. So we will have links, obviously, Excellent. To those that we can. And I think there is already a link to the Estin report. Yes. And I don't think we've received the CIW one yet. So, yes. So those will be there.
And that's really helpful. It's a very effective one-stop shop in terms of those key regulators and their assessment of our performance as independent organisations. Councillor Baldwin and then Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. I was actually over on the report and had to switch back then in time. Is to take you, it's not necessarily a question, Jill, and it may be for Janine to answer or to give further context around in relation to page 45 and the issue of community asset transfers being a red indicator, considering that we still managed to achieve 13 asset transfers during what you've all described as an unprecedented year, an unprecedented time, showing that there's an actually increased performance. And I just think that I'd like the director or yourself, Jill, to explain how we can increase performance but still be presented with a red indicator. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Baldwin. Jill, please.
Well, I was going to invite Janine to come in on this. She's most definitely got the detail, I suspect.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Janine, please.
Apologies, Leader. I just had to go to the door because there was policemen knocking my front door. So I went, it's a house-to-house inquiry, so apologies. Right. So I missed that last snippet of the conversation. Apologies, Jill. Right. But if you want to repeat it, I'm sure I can assist you.
Not a problem, Janine. It was just asking for a further explanation in relation to context of why community asset transfer is an increased performance but still shown as a red when we only missed the actual target by 2. Thank you.
No, not a problem. I can answer that. We had a target of 15 community asset transfers last year, and we managed to deliver 13, which is absolutely marvellous considering we were in the middle of a pandemic. But in the performance report, if you miss your target by more than 10% or it is seen as red. And I'm afraid we did that by achieving 13 community asset transfers, not 15. But to be fair, having achieved 13 during the pandemic was quite a feat, and I congratulated the team. So I suppose what we need to explore is the narrative behind that red RAG rating. It seems a little unfair. Had we not achieved any community asset transfers, I would happily be red. But the team under Guy Smith were wonderful actually last year and achieved 13, Leader. So that's why it's shown as red, but unfairly so, though, I would say. Thank you.
And therein is a very important example, isn't it, of where context and explanation is everything. And whilst statistics are important, without that context, they can be misleading, and the team has made incredible progress given the context, and actually we know there are many more community asset transfer proposals in the pipeline, and we look forward to reading about more of that progress in the coming weeks and months. Councillor Baldwin, as you just had the electronic floor, would you like to move the annual report for presentation to Councillor Baldwin?
of course, Leader, more than happy to move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. And do I have a seconder to that, please?
Happy to second.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Of course, I'm sure there will be more discussion of the report at full council tomorrow, and I know that in other meetings this has been discussed in depth by Cabinet colleagues and members of the Corporate Management Board. But of course, there will be an opportunity for further discussion tomorrow. Well, thank you, Jill. We'll now receive our second report, another report from our Interim Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. It is on our budget monitoring for the year and our Q2 revenue forecast. Jill, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. This is a report to Cabinet that you will be very familiar with. This is your budget monitoring report, and it's the Q2 revenue forecast. And it's quite an important point in the year for Cabinet to look at the likely forecast for the outturn at the end of the year. So I'll give Cabinet a brief update on the Q2. And remember, this is revenue, capital will follow. So on the 24th of February, Council approved the budget, which was just shy of 300 million. And this is the second report against that budget. And you'll be familiar now with the format of the report, I think, as Cabinet. And Table 1 is a summary of the position. And you'll see at the summary in Table 1 that there's an underspend at the moment forecast of £2 million. Now, I think what I want to do at this point is really set out how we've got to that point and without alarming anybody, talk about some of the underlying pressures, because there is a grave danger that we're lulled into a false sense of security, I think, in terms of the financial position. And some may think that this is at odds with all the things that they see in the press and on social media about pressures. And in fact, the position does look at odds. But what this does mask is the underlying position. What it also does is includes the Hardship Fund, which again, Cabinet will be familiar with. That was set up at the start of the pandemic. It ran all the way through 2021. We weren't certain whether it would run into 21-22. It ran for the first 6 months. And then the Welsh Government agreed to extend it for the last 6 months, which we've now entered into, with a view that it will taper downwards as recovery sets in, and there's an expectation that services will regain their pre-pandemic levels. Now, I'm sure there'll be some discussion about that. Some may not, and there may well be still additional funding available. So this includes the Hardship Fund so far, but it excludes obviously any hardship funding in the second half of the year. And we're in the process of going through that now. We don't know what expenditure we're going to incur for the next 5 months, well, including October 6 months. And we also are uncertain about our levels of income or loss of income and how we'll regain those. So I think in essence, as I've said, it significantly masks the underlying pressures, which are set out very clearly, I think, from 414 onwards. Cabinet will be familiar with the overspend on home to school transport and the budget that was supported in 21-22 with a one-off budget pressure of 1.2 million. We've received grant and obviously that's looking at the moment as though it will be overspent by about 2 million from 22-23 onwards. So that's obviously a big pressure. In terms of social care, the pressures, I think, are extremely well documented, both nationally and throughout the UK. We've received additional grant of 1.7 million already. And we obviously, the expectation is that there may be even further monies to try and help some of those pressures. But you can already see that there are difficulties in recruiting from all the media. And even with grant and the difficulties in recruiting, so therefore high levels of vacancies, there is still a 0.5 million overspend. So the pressures will continue on this particular budget. 416, you'll recall that Council approved over £2 million growth for homelessness in the 21-22 budget. We weren't expecting to receive as much money as we have from the Welsh Government. As I said at the beginning, we weren't sure how long the Hardship Fund would run for, but we have been successful in getting quite a degree of money back for the temporary accommodation that we've been funding. But even though we've been successful, we still may have insufficient funds going forward. We've still got 200, just upwards of 200 families in temporary accommodation, 370 individuals. So this is a pressure that's going to endure. And then 417 refers to the increase in waste from all sorts of reasons, but working from home and other various reasons have increased the tonnage in terms of waste, and that's another pressure going forward. And interestingly, those pressures are very much mirrored with the other local authorities in Wales and in England, very, very consistent in terms of the pressures going forward. More detail on all of these is set out in section 4.3 onwards. As I say, Bridgend continues to be supported by the Hardship Fund, although that is now reducing. And we also established in the council the £1 million COVID recovery fund, and that continues to be used to support free car parking in town centres, rental income reduction and waiver of sports fees. And table 2 shows the expenditure claimed up until August, which is still quite high at 5 million. But obviously, as I've said, that will now start reducing. Table 3 shows the claims for loss of income that I referred to, which is another £500,000, which has been successfully claimed. But again, there's an expectation that that will reduce. As you would expect, we're closely monitoring council tax collection and claims for council tax reduction. No additional funding has been announced by Welsh Government, but they have stated that they will look at the position later in the year when the position is clearer. It's always very, very difficult to estimate what the likely collection position will be at the end of the year, particularly with all the difficulties. The environments and tech adjustments are set out in 4.1.18 and 4.19 to 4.21 sets out the detail on pay and prices that you'll be used to seeing. The funding will be released on teachers' pay, and obviously money's been set aside for the NJC award when that's agreed. When we set the budget, inflation was 0.7%. You've heard me talk about that. It's now running at nearly 4%, and I understand today that it's likely to go up to 4.5% next month, and that's going to put some incredible pressure, I think, on our prices budgets. So we're still likely to need reductions going forward, estimated at the moment at around 20 million over the 4-year period, but that's obviously dependent on the settlement and the levels of pressure that I've referred to in many of our services. Table 4 sets out the prior year budget reductions with just 240 K remaining, more details shown in Appendix 1, and Table 5 sets out this year's budget reductions, and considering the unprecedented year, there's only 65K outstanding, and that relates to the opening of the new recycling centre in Pwlb, which obviously is just slightly delayed. So more detail on those is set out in Appendix 2. As I said, a summary of the financial position is set out in 4.3 and in Appendix 3, and the detail on the earmarked reserves is shown in Table 6. But just very briefly to remind Cabinet that earmarked reserves are there for a purpose, and I know there's been a lot of media speculation about reserves and the use of reserves. We've received reports from Audit Wales, both local and national, on financial sustainability, which are well worth reading, which really clearly sets out the position on reserves and what they should be used for. And wherever possible, what we are endeavouring to do is to try and keep money in our capital reserve, as we're so short in the council of capital receipts, and obviously there's an awful lot of schemes that the council want to pursue. Just last point, the school balances, which were just over 8 million at the year end, due to the grants, which you'll recall I've spoken about before, are now forecast to drop to 4 million. As the funding is utilised for the purpose intended. So that's a very brief canter through, perhaps not quite as brief as you were expecting, but I think it's really important that we understand the position, because there will be some very mixed messages on our balances. So that's all I wanted to say, Leader. Happy to take questions, and the recommendations are at 9.1.
Thank you for that, Jill, and for the report. It is important that we have the latest information, because it is a ever-changing picture and financial environment in which we are working. I can see that Councillor Patel wants to come in, and then I will bring in the Deputy Leader. Councillor Patel, please.
Do you want to bring in the Deputy Leader, and then I'll come in afterwards?
Yeah, I could do that. It's just you were.
Yeah, I was first, I know.
Your hand first. Deputy Leader, then, please.
Thank you, Leader. And if I begin with moving the officer's recommendation, and I think you just alluded to the fact that it's probably never been such a challenging time to make financial forecasts, and my phone is going off. It's never been a more challenging time to make financial forecasts, and the purpose of this report is to try and compare performance against those predictions that we made back in February. And it's it really is like trying to nail spaghetti to the wall. It feels like it sometimes. We are very grateful for the support that we get from the Hardship Fund, from Welsh Government, to help us through this very difficult period. but the uncertainty around inflation and next year's settlement still means that we have to proceed with caution. We still have underlying pressures there that need a long-term solution, and so it's this sort of it's good news, but we're still cautious.
Always cautious. Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader. And yeah, I think it is. Well, it's been like this for a little while now. It's impossible to predict, and therefore, I guess my thanks are to the finance team for trying to get some sort of figures on paper for us to look at and use as a basis for projecting forward. I do have some concerns reading this in relation to staff vacancies. I noticed that a lot of, or I'm not sure, I've just picked it up and I feel like a lot of the underspends are due to staff vacancies. I don't know if you've done any sums around whether or not that's a significant percentage or proportion of the underspend is due to staffing. And I guess Mark, maybe, or Jill, if you could answer if that's something we should be concerned about and addressing. I know it's difficult because it's a difficult time and everyone's recruiting, but should we be more concerned about it, I guess?
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Jill, please.
Mark, do you want me to kick off, or do you want to answer?
I'm happy to come in initially, Jill, really. I mean, I think okay. Councillor Patel makes a very good point. I mean, if I'm frank, it is something we're very concerned about because there are pockets throughout the organisation where there are significant staff vacancies, and it is actually very difficult to recruit, as you alluded to, really. So it's not through lack of effort. And there are a range of initiatives that we have launched over recent months to try and address that, including growing our own, but including also incentivising and producing marketing campaigns in relevant areas. I think the risk is ultimately about service delivery, isn't it, and about the resilience of service delivery. So what I suppose I would stress is that these underspends are undesirable underspends. They are not things that we can spend the money on something else on, because we really want to find ways of recruiting sufficient staff to deliver services effectively. So I think the challenge at the moment is we do seem to be in a bit of a perfect storm that for a range of reasons that you no doubt will have read of as well. It's particularly difficult at the moment to recruit to certain jobs. But all I can reassure you, Councillor Patel, is that we are doing our utmost to try and address that. We're doing our utmost to obviously prioritise those areas that we consider to be most important. But ultimately, if we are unable to fill vacancies, then the overall quantum of capacity and resource we have in the organisation is compromised, and it means that there are obviously some things that don't get done or don't get done as quickly. So that's probably not entirely what you want to hear, but I think it's only fair to be honest with you. But I do know that every other local authority in Wales, from my regular meetings with other chief executives, is facing something very similar or sometimes worse. So it is a particular challenge at the moment, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mark. And I would also add, in terms of the pressures, in particular around social care, that this is right at the top of the agenda for every local authority in Wales. And indeed, when we recently had an historic first ever joint meeting of the whole of the Cabinet of Welsh Government, including the First Minister and each and every one of his ministers, a joint meeting of Welsh Government's Cabinet with all 22 leaders of local authorities across Wales. There were two topics that we asked to discuss and Welsh Government wanted to discuss with us, and they were climate change, the climate emergency, and the acute challenges in social care. And of course, as you would expect us to do, we raised the issue, as we now do on a weekly basis, around the pressures faced by social care in each and every one of the 22 local authorities across Wales, and the need for long-term sustainable funding. And of course, I'm also following that up as the WLJ spokesperson and presiding officer, WLJ spokesperson for health and social care, in now weekly meetings with the Minister for Health and the Deputy Minister for Social Services. The report has been moved by the Deputy Leader. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Is everyone in agreement that the forecast is noted? And I've no doubt that we will continue to take all the action that we can internally to address any overspends and indeed underspends. And we will also continue at every opportunity to make the case to Welsh Government. And Welsh Government have been listening. They have provided additional funding. The difficulty will be about the permanency of that funding, because most of the funding hitherto has been temporary, and of course that is in large part because they do not have, Welsh Government does not yet have enough funding certainty from the UK Government, but hopefully the comprehensive spending review will address that, and there'll be then an opportunity once UK Government has addressed that for Welsh Government to give us greater certainty around our finances. We will never get complete certainty, not now, because of the continuing impact of the pandemic and other economic shocks in the system, but greater certainty will certainly help in our planning. Thank you, Jill. We'll now receive your third report today on fees and charges and our policy on those fees and charges. Jill, please.
Item 6, Leader.
Next.
Oh, it is indeed. Thank you for the more eagle-eyed deputy. That's why you're the lead member for finance and the chief officer for finance. You're better at accounting than I am. Yes, it's the capital programme next. Thank you, colleagues.
I'll just leave, Leader.
Oh, right, of course. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Blair. You want me to leave your room just virtually? Okay. Okay, please begin. Jill.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Leader. This is a report. Oh, sorry, for the purposes of recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer Finance, Performance and Change. And this is the capital programme update to Q2 for 21-22. Again, a report that you'll be familiar with receiving. So the purpose of the report is obviously to comply with all the requirements, to provide you with an update on the capital position for 21-22 as at the 30th of September, and that's set out in Appendix A. To seek agreement from Cabinet today to present the report to Council for approval for a revised capital programme for 21-22 to 2030-31, because it's a 10-year programme, at Appendix B, and to note the projected prudential and other indicators for 21-22 set out in Appendix C. So again, on the 24th of February, Council approved a capital budget of just over 62 million for 21-22, and that's as part of the capital programme for 21-22, 30-31. And this report today gives you a revised programme, the monitoring of the capital strategy and the monitoring on the prudential and other indicators. At 4.2, you will see the update for Q2 and the revised programme for 21-22, which currently totals just over 76 million. 54 million of that is funded by BCBC and 22 million external. And Table 1 sets out the position by directorate. You will see from that the bulk of our capital spend is in education and family support, schools and various other schemes, and communities, with by far the largest share of the capital programme. Table 2 sets out those funding assumptions that I just referred to, and with a little bit more detail as to how we're funding the schemes. Appendix A gives the detail of the individual schemes. So just to update you, a number of schemes have already been identified as requiring slippage into 22-23 or even later, and those total 12.8 million. You'll see the detail on those schemes set out in paragraphs 4.4 onwards. The main ones for slippage are the City Deal, the Children's Residential Hub, community play areas, Bridgend Heat and the Kyra Heat network, with a few smaller ones set out there in the list. You'll see from 4.5 onwards details of new externally and internally funded schemes, and there's some very exciting ones here. Active travel and safety road improvements, the Bridgend College relocation, Abercardine Primary, a community hub, Brinteg comprehensive, a multi-use games pitch, the health and wellbeing village, and some further work to enhance the Maesteg Town Hall piece. Also, as Cabinet will know, we've been looking at CCTV across the borough to make it a smart borough, and there's the addition of public Wi-Fi set out as one of the new schemes, which is an exciting development. So a revised capital programme is included at Appendix B with all the detail there. 4.8 to 4.10 sets out the detail of the prudential and other indicators, with those set out in Appendix C. And as I always say at this point, and hopefully will continue to do so, that shows that the council is operating within our approved limits. 4.11 and 4.12 details the non-treasury management investments and other long-term liabilities. So that's all I wanted to say by way of an update, Leader. Take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Thank you for that, Jill, and I'll now bring in the Deputy Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and it does give me some enjoyment, I suppose, to recommend to move the recommendation on this report. That there is something there across a whole range of services, from education, recreation, well-being, climate change agenda, employment, and I just would like to focus a little bit on the CCTV Wi-Fi project. This is a very exciting project to create a smart county borough, to enable free Wi-Fi to the general public in our more heavily populated areas. I see this as a very exciting step forward to create a vibrant digital economy. Happy to move the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Does anyone else want to come in? Councillor Baldwin, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and happy to see on page 119 as well, in relation to the accessibility and safety road improvements, in particular the enhancements that are going to be made from Broadlands to Newbridge Fields, with around £57,000 being spent there out of the 148,000 that is targeted for it. So really happy to see those improvements along with the other ones that the Deputy Leader's already raised, and happy to second that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin, and I'm pleased to see that, and I'm also particularly pleased to see the planned investment in a new community hub in Evanstown at Abercerdyn Primary School, and that's an excellent example of how we have used effectively additional funding that's been made available by Welsh Government to be able to create a new community-focused hub within that school. And it's exciting because, and I'm not saying this just because the Deputy Leader is Chair of Governors. I know it to be the case because Estyn have indeed highlighted the community focus of Abercerdyn Primary School and the commitment of the school itself to help fund this hub speaks volumes, and there's fantastic opportunities with that hub to strengthen further those links between the school and the community. And I'm also delighted as well to see a similar amount being invested in the multi-use sports pitch at Bryn Teg Comprehensive School. And the plans include new floodlights as well, which of course will enable greater usage outside of school hours and during the winter. Again, this is an example of the school working very effectively, closely and successfully with the local authority to secure Welsh Government funding to invest in this community facility that will benefit many people from across Bridgend. Deputy Leader, I can see that your hand has been raised. I think it's a new hand, but I'm just checking.
My hand is down on my screen, Leader.
Oh, right, apologies. Right, okay. It was up on mine, and now it's down. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Well, you've moved the recommendations. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations?
I seconded the report, Councillor.
You did, didn't you? Of course, Councillor Baldwin. And of course, we will discuss this in further detail tomorrow. And I should have added, actually, because it is important. It's an iconic project for us. The further investment in Maesteg Town Hall, where there have been further unforeseen additional works required, but I think it's very, very important that we undertake those works. Now we are on site. So, for example, the South Annex roof, we would want to make sure that that roof is fit for purpose, so we don't have to revisit in the future. Let's take the opportunity whilst we are already undertaking major refurbishments. Thank you for that, Jill. We'll now receive the next report on the agenda, and your final report today. No, not your final report. We'll receive a report on the treasury on fees and charges, and then we'll receive a report on treasury management. I'm getting there. So treasury management, please, Jill. Thank you.
No, I think it's fees and charges first, Leader.
Fees and charges, yeah. Apologies.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And the purpose of the report you have in front of you today is to seek approval from Cabinet for a revised fees and charges policy. I think it's worth just reminding Cabinet that the Council's ability to generate fees and charges is really important in helping to support its budget, and it's a key factor in achieving the corporate wellbeing objectives and provides, I guess, the opportunity to deliver the widest range of services that you can. So it is a key part of the budget. And as part of the medium-term financial strategy previously, we had an income generation and charging policy which aimed to set a consistent approach. So in essence, where charges were set, we would aim to get a full cost recovery. Unless a decision had been made to not do that and to subsidise the charges with by council tax payers. Also, the previous strategy set out the expectation that charges would be increased by CPI plus 1%. And I guess during the scrutiny of the MTFS last year, 2021, the strategy was reviewed, and COSC recommended that the policy be looked at again to see if there was any opportunity to make it more consistent and to look at whether it was still fair and equitable. So we have done that. The revised policy is attached at Appendix A. What I think would be just useful if I just set out very briefly the main changes to the contents. So in Appendix A, you'll see that there's a table 2 which shows the charging strategy considerations. There's more detail on the process for reviewing fees and charges and general assumptions, which is set out in section 7. And an amendment that charges should be increased by the consumer price index at the start of the financial year. And that's a change in terms of what our expectation is. There didn't seem to be a logic behind CPI plus 1%. And so we have revised that in the new policy. So charges should be increased by the consumer price index at the start of the financial year, and you be expected to take that from December, which is when that date, the CPI increase will be published. There's a reference to updated delegated powers set out in paragraph 7.3. There's reference to the process to be followed where it is not proposed to increase fees and charges. So there is an inbuilt assumption that they will increase. Obviously, it goes without saying that a number of our fees and charges are set by statute or by regulations, and we have no discretion at all in those. But where we do have, then there's an expectation that they will increase by CPI unless there is a conscious decision to not do so. And so the process is set out in paragraphs 7.4 to 7.6. And then there's a section on the publication of fees and charges at section 9, because what we did realise, I think, as we went through this process was that whilst we inevitably had all our fees and charges on our website, they weren't all in an easily accessible form. And so we're now proposing to bring all those together so that at a glance residents can see how much we charge for certain things without having to wade through pages and pages on our website. So that's really in a nutshell the changes that are proposed, and hopefully that will be equitable and consistent. So I take you to the recommendation, Leader, at 9.1.
Thank you for that, Jill, and I'll ask the Deputy Leader to come in, please.
Thanks, Leader. Can I lower my hands now before we start? Yes, I am happy to bring this report before Cabinet. I think it does offer some transparency to the fee and charging process. I know it's a recommendation from the Budget Research and Evaluation panel last year, and I suppose for some members of the public it will sadly sort of smash the myth that council tax doesn't actually pay for everything. You know, most of our fees come from social care provision and from the planning system, and those fees are actually set by Welsh Government. Our hands are actually tied there. We can only charge what Welsh Government allows us to charge, and that is nowhere near the full true cost of the service. Now, whilst we can set fees for car parking and burials and Porthcawl Harbour, there again we're only allowed to cover our costs, recover our costs there. So again, our hands are tied to some degree, and where we do have some freedom is in our commercial rents. Well, of course, we want to encourage employment in areas where there are limited employment opportunities. So I think the whole purpose of this report is there to provide some transparency to the decision making, and and I think that it enables us then to make an informed decision and around our fees and charges. So and I welcome obviously the full list of fees and charges which will accompany the MTFS papers when we set the budget in February next year. So happy to move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations? Noting, of course, that it was a recommendation of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee that the fees and charges policy be reviewed in 2021-2022. Do I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second those, Leader, especially considering that came from a cross-party group as well.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Everyone in agreement, please? Thank you very much, colleagues. This, I think, is the final report of the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and it's on our Treasury Management Half-Year Report 2021 to 2022. Jill, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, Jill Lewis, the Interim Chief Officer, Finance, Performance and Change. And as you said, Leader, this is indeed the Treasury Management's the half-year report for 21-22. And the purpose of the report is obviously to comply with the regulations set out in Treasury Management in Public Services, the Code of Practice, and to report on the projected Treasury Management indicators for 2021-22. So Appendix A provides the detail of the position, but if I just pull out a few key points for you this afternoon, and this is obviously for Cabinet to note, and this report is on Council tomorrow afternoon. So you've probably heard me refer to our internal borrowing previously, and the council has had surplus funds during 21-22 for investment during the first 6 months of the year, because we had significant Welsh Government funding towards the end of 2021, and also 2 lots of revenue support grant in April. So that has enabled us to provide funds for internal borrowing, as I refer to it. The long-term debt position remains constant at around about 97 million, as it has been for a number of years. And any other long-term liabilities are primarily the PFI scheme that was used to provide my Steg secondary school. So the investments that we've got totaled about 80 million, with an average interest rate of around 0.06%. Now that is obviously a significant fall from the same time last year, when the rate was 0.24%, and even 0.21 at the 31st of March. So we no longer are getting any real return on any of our investments. So obviously that's an issue for the future. 2 long-term investments matured at the end of November, which were at higher rates, so that obviously has affected that. Local authorities and the money market funds remain our 2 primary investment vehicles. The local authority investments can be for a period of between 1 month and up to a number of years, but the majority of ours are under 12 months at the moment. Money markets are instant access. So at the 30th of September, the council had about 29 million with local authorities, 24 million with money market funds, including the DMO and banks, totaling 27 million. So we are in a position where we are able to use that money for internal borrowing. You will remember also that we have to set aside resources to repay debt in the future, and that's one of those lines in the budget that can't be changed, where we need to set aside. It's known as the minimum revenue provision, and you will recall, Cabinet, that whenever we talk about capital, I remind everybody that you have to set aside revenue to pay back any borrowing. So that's set out in the report. And the minimum level of borrowing needed is estimated to be about 100 million at the moment, but obviously that fluctuates depending on the capital programme. The primary objective, as you will know from me presenting Treasury Management previously, is to make sure that the long-term debt is affordable. And as you know, I do remind everybody of that. And the majority of the loans that we've got are with the Public Works Loan Board. They're long-term fixed rates of interest, and so the last time we took out new borrowing was 2012. There's just 2 more points that I wanted to raise. The key change to Pwlb borrowing for local authorities that I have mentioned before, which is I have to certify that we're not using any borrowing primarily for yield. So any investment in property or anything of that nature purely for yield is going to be very, very strictly policed, and we wouldn't be able to borrow at all if we were to transgress that rule. I do remind you of that because the local authority code consultation is about to end, and my understanding is that it's going to be strengthened and will be very, very strictly policed. So I do need to bring that to your attention. I will bring it to Council's attention as well tomorrow. And then the investment strategy and investments profile is set out in section 4. And you will have heard me say this before. It's security, then liquidity, and only finally do we look at the return yield. And so hopefully keeping the council as safe as possible. So I didn't want to say anything further on this at this stage, Leader. I'm happy to take any questions and take you to the recommendations at 9.1.
Thank you for that, Jill, and I will bring the Deputy Leader in, please. Deputy.
Leader, I'm conscious that we have a lot of business before us, so if you don't mind, I'll just take you to the recommendation. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Do I have a seconder for that? Recognising, of course, that we'll be discussing this in full council tomorrow. It'll be an identical
Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Everyone in agreement? Everyone in agreement, please?
Agreed.
Yes, thank you, colleagues. We'll now move on to the first report of the Corporate Director, Education and Family Support. And that's an update on the Early Childhood Education and Care Pilot. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. As you know, the purpose of this report is to provide an update regarding the proposed Early Childhood Education and Care. I'll refer to it as ECEC in this report. The background of this project is set out at paragraph 3 of the report, and Cabinet members will be aware that the local authority has been working with the Welsh Government towards piloting an ECEC project since 2019. At its meeting in February 2020, Cabinet was presented with a range of options in respect to this pilot, and option 2, as outlined in paragraph 3.2, was agreed at that time. It was agreed the local authority would test the number of ECEC elements, and the pilot was planned to take a staged approach to implementation. Some fundamental ECEC elements were to be tested in the first year, and those would be built on in following years by the testing of additional elements where possible. The overarching parameters of the pilot are identified at paragraph 3.4. The pilot aimed ultimately to focus on the removal of barriers that exist between education and care in order to ensure that any setting, whether a school, private or voluntary childcare, could offer ECEC provision. A development plan included working towards proposed criteria for participation, detailed scope and exercises, design delivery models, and the development of a system for ECEC delivery. 5 delivery models were proposed, outlining where it was possible to pilot an ECEC approach in Bridgend. These are outlined in Appendix B. Scope in the project raised a number of benefits and barriers to the implementation of delivery, and both Bridgend and Welsh Government are now a more evidence-based and strategic understanding of the complex infrastructure that would need to take place for the future of any future effective pilot. The potential barriers to delivery are listed in the report, but I'll capture these now. These included the absence of a joint inspection framework between Estyn and Care Inspectorate Wales, the lack of appropriate and available space within school sites available to develop ECEC childcare, the delivery of free school meals and transport to achieve parity provision in all settings, the impact on a school's published admission number, especially, of course, the impact children being turned away as they attempt to progress the school's reception class setting, and finally, the challenge of differing staff qualifications in the maintained and non-maintained sector. While Welsh Government remains committed to a 10-year transformation programme to develop the philosophy of ECEC, since the election in May, the priorities for Welsh Government have refocused on a response to the pandemic and planned recovery programme. At this time, with the complexities and national implications for delivery of ECEC that have been identified within the scoping process, Welsh Government has advised the local authority that the ECEC project will be discontinued. Colleagues from Welsh Government have stated their thanks to the local authority for the significant learning to date and advised that the knowledge around any future development of ECEC will benefit significantly from the work undertaken in Bridgend. Although Welsh Government has advised that the pilot is to be discontinued, they confirmed that funding to support the administration of the ECEC pilot remains in place for the financial year 2021-2022. And this agreement is in place to support an appropriate and planned exit strategy, along with a thorough evaluation of the work to date. I think it's importantly that the local authority agrees appropriate steps towards closing the pilot with Welsh Government colleagues, and the partnership work to deliver this continues. And while the decision was made by Welsh Government means the end of the pilot, some investigations and scoping work will continue this financial year to capture and clarify the issues and barriers, and indeed propose potential solutions for the future. The service continues to meet Welsh Government colleagues to collate information and evidence highlighted during the scoping period. An effective communication plan has once again been devised to ensure all stakeholders who participate in the pilot are offered an opportunity to contribute towards the final findings of the work undertaken. And this has been agreed with Welsh Government to ensure an effective and thorough exit strategy is developed alongside the review of the learning to date. The work that has been completed will be relevant to the ongoing progression of early years services within Bridgend and across Wales. And Leader, paragraphs 4.10 and 4.11 of the report provide further information. Funding has been agreed to support related activities and administration, including the development of an in-depth post-pilot report and analysis to conclude the ECC pilot to the sum of £200,000. And with that, Leader, I take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9. Specifically, the Cabinet agrees that the Education and Family Support Directorate brings the work of the ECC pilot to a close following safe and effective actions around the proposed strategy. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Lindsay. Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Lindsay, and to the team behind the scenes that worked on this pilot scheme. It is a shame that they've had to, well, they've changed their priorities. I obviously understand, you know, with the pandemic, I think it is right for them to change their priorities, but it's still a shame. And I think there is a lot of learning that's come out of this, and I hope that when they look to reinvigorate it, that they look at the practicalities around delivery, because I think that was something that has been highlighted through the learning from the report, that it's great in theory, but we do need to put some practicalities in place, or look at the practicalities. One thing I wanted to just clarify is the impact on residents. Would you be able to just you know, confirm that there will be no negative impact on families and parents as a result of the decision to just stop the pilot, really? Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Councillor Patel. First of all, just to recognise your kind words, Tina Haddon has joined this meeting, and I know Tina has done an enormous amount of work around this, and I know that your thanks and congratulations to the service will be well felt, so thanks, Councillor Patel. So just to confirm, there will be no impact whatsoever on the residents of Bridgend. They won't be negatively impacted, and the current excellent offer of childcare and early years education in Bridgend will remain in place.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lindsay, and I'm sure that is of reassurance to the parents and carers across the county borough. And I too want to add my personal thanks to Tina and colleagues who worked so hard on this pilot. There has been learning particularly for Welsh Government, and I hope and trust that they will revisit this as soon when there is more space and capacity for Welsh Government to return to this. It's very important that they do, because one of the lessons, the many lessons that we've learned, or others have learned from the pandemic, and certainly I'm sure colleagues in Welsh Government, is the value of early years, and particularly as with so many things in life, until you don't have it and you miss out on it, do you realise how important it is? And unfortunately, during many very difficult periods during lockdown, children weren't able to benefit fully from that early years experience that we are so proud of in Bridgend. And that was a very stark reminder to people about how important it is. So thank you, colleagues. So that's recommendations been moved. Do I have a seconder for the recommendation, please?
Councillor Burnett's got her hand up, Leader.
Oh, I cannot see that, and I can see it now. So Councillor Burnett, please. Apologies, Councillor.
Sorry, apologies. No, I just wanted to add my thanks. I think it is disappointing that this didn't go forward as a project, but I think we can't knock the aspiration behind this project, and we know in this county how important it is, and we already commit to early years education above and beyond other counties in Wales, so we know the benefits of it. And yeah, I hope that the lessons will be learned. I know that the evidence will be gathered and it will be looked at, and I hope it isn't too long before things are put in place so that a project like this can work, because I think it will be hugely beneficial. So thank you to the teams. It's much appreciated.
Certainly is. Thank you, Councillor Batten. Thank you for seconding the report. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please, colleagues?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We'll now receive the second report of the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support, and that is on the school modernisation programme at Kenfig Hill and the plans for Mynydd Kenfig Primary School. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to apprise Cabinet of the outcome of the feasibility study in respect of locating a proposed two-form entry school plus a 75-place nursery replacement Mynydd Kenfig Primary School on the junior site, and to seek approval to undertake a statutory process in respect of this proposal. The background of this report, Leader, is set out at paragraph 3. In November 2019, the Mynydd Kenfig Primary School infant site suffered a significant failure of its heating system, and the repair forced the temporary closure of the school building. A subsequent building condition survey reduced the school from its previous condition, that is a C, to a category D, where it's determined the life has expired or at risk of imminent closure, and this required significant or immediate works. The nature and assortment of the disrepairs highlighted within the survey made isolated repair works to individual fabric elements of the school extremely challenging and economically unfeasible. Therefore, Leader, in June 2020, Cabinet approval was received to reprioritise Band B, bringing forward the replacement school scheme for Mynydd Kenfig Primary School, and paragraph 4 of this report notes that following the conclusion of the feasibility study, the local authority will look to build a new two-form entry primary school on the junior school site. In terms of providing a new school building and amenities, these would be fit for the 21st century. From a parental perspective, learners can be brought to and collected from the same school site. Teacher and support staff expertise can be shared across the foundation phase and Key Stage 2 more effectively, as all would be based on one site. Transition plans for pupils can be carried out more effectively, and resources can be deployed more efficiently, as all would be based on the one site. As noted in paragraph 4.1, BCBC land adjacent to the site is required to ensure there's sufficient developable area around the school. One site is used by the Air Training Corps, and this is subject to a lease which expires in February 2023, at which point a statutory notice can be served by the Council to bring the tenant's occupation to an end. As the Council is redeveloping the site, there's a statutory process to follow, and as such there's a risk the tenant may challenge the statutory notice. Further information regarding the statutory requirements and ongoing discussions are provided at paragraph 4 of this report. By way of further information, Leader, I can confirm that the school playing field would be provided as per the current location. The children's playground area would be relocated immediately adjacent to the existing provision, and the area allocated for the playground will be no less than the existing site area used by this provision. The local authority has employed third-party consultants to undertake a transport assessment, and the summary of the review is contained in paragraph 4.9 of this report. Further work in respect to the new school's transport assessment will be undertaken by the local authority's highways officers in due course, and the parking and drop-off areas will be determined by the transport assessment and will align with parking regulations. A school travel plan will be developed by the school in order to encourage and support a whole school approach to active and sustainable travel. A site investigation has been undertaken, no concerns are raised in relation to the ground conditions, and there are minimal contamination issues noted. Further investigated work, however, in relation to the site will be undertaken, and these will be reported in due course. The financial implications of these proposals, Leader, are set out at paragraph 8, and you'll be aware that in December 2018 the Council approved a programme envelope of £71.3 million covering Band B new school bills of £68.2 million and potential highways works of £3.1 million. £10.2 million has been allocated in the capital programme for this project, and the Welsh Government intervention rate is 65%. Any changes to the total cost of the scheme or council contributions will be reported back to Cabinet and Council as appropriate. The scheme, should it go ahead, could generate revenue cost efficiencies as a consequence of moving from multiple sites to a single site. The exact amounts are difficult to quantify at present, and they will form part of the annual form of funding process. Therefore, Leader, I take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9. Specifically, the Cabinet approves to commence the statutory consultation process to open a new Mynydd Cymru primary school on the junior site, ready for first entry in September 2025.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Very, very pleased to see that report and to hear that this afternoon. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. It gives me great pleasure to formally propose that we accept the recommendations on this report. I think Lindsay's summary has covered all the aspects that need to be covered. So let's just get on with this, and without any further ado, I recommend adoption.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Councillor Burnett, please.
Sorry, Leader, I don't have my hand up, but I'm happy to second.
Well, thank you for seconding. Apologies, I'm having real difficulty with the hands being up and then not coming down. So thank you for seconding that. And can I say how excited I am that this proposal is with us today, and I know that the three local members are equally excited. Councillor Gebby, who of course is also Chair of Governors at Mynydd Cymru Primary School, Councillor Kernan, Councillor Stephen Smith, are very supportive of these proposals, because they do represent the single biggest investment in education in Cemfrigil in certainly my lifetime, and will transform the facilities available. For the first time, facilities, purpose-built, state-of-the-art facilities will all be in one place. So we've always had excellent provision that's been recognised by Estin, both the infants and the junior site, and of course they were separate schools until relatively recently, but having them all on one site in a purpose-built facility will provide additional benefits around that all-important transition from the different phases, and enable a more effective deployment of teaching and staffing resources, and of course the ability for staff and for children to access all the facilities, indoor and outdoor, that we'll be planning for the site. And I really look forward to hearing what the community, what the governors, what the staff, what and most importantly of all, what the children and young people think about these plans. And as we do with every Band A and Band B school modernisation programme, we will carry out extensive and comprehensive consultation, and we will take that on board when considering the next steps, of course. Now, because of the problems I'm having, Councillor Smith, I'm assuming that is a legacy hand I can see.
It's not a legacy hand.
It's a new hand, right? Okay.
It's not a ghost hand either, because we seem to have got a new category now of ghost hand.
It's a new hand. Oh, back to you then, Councillor Smith.
I'd like to come back in. My wife's listening, and she went to Cemfrigil Primary. I was a Pwlb boy myself, but You mentioned local members, and there's a part of me that regards myself as a local member for Pwlb and Kenfig as well. You can't shake that off in the same way as Lindsay has got a national inclination towards all things my stag, but it is a very important investment for the community in Kenfig. But I'm coming back in because really, to be perfectly clinically correct, I ought to declare an interest because I've got nephews and nieces who will benefit from this investment. And to tell you the truth, they're not nieces and nephews. They're great nieces and great nephews. Actually, to be perfectly honest, they are great nieces and great nephews, but they're all going to enjoy these new facilities.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith, and I'm sure they will benefit from the from the facilities. I'm not going to review my family tree, otherwise I suspect I'll need to make some personal declarations, but not.
Don't start. You'll be here all day.
Prejudicial interests, but I am thrilled. I really am thrilled that we've reached this this stage, and I know how excited actually, Lindsay, you were only saying in a recent meeting how excited the governors are and how committed the senior leadership team at the school are to this plan, and that's so important to making a success of this scheme, and knowing the brilliant staff as I do at that school, and the excellent staff that we've got working on it in terms of our school modernisation team, very experienced and dedicated team. I know this will be a success because the school and the team will make it a success, and we look forward to the response to the consultation and receiving a further report back. Is everyone in agreement with that, please, colleagues?
Great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'll now invite our Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing to give a report on the proposed innovation of contracts within adult social care. Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. I'm Claire Marchant. I'm Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and this report is primarily an administrative report. It doesn't have any impact on care provided, staff delivering services, or any financial implications, but it does require Cabinet approval. So the report sets out proposals that Dimensions Cymru is a new element, a subsidiary of Dimensions UK, a national organisation, and Dimensions UK looked at its governance structure following the Regulation and Inspection of Care Act coming onto the statute books in Wales, and in order to respond to specific Care Inspectorate Wales recommendation requirements, which differ slightly to the Care Act in England, it decided to set up Dimensions Cymru as a subsidiary organisation. So the report requests approval to transfer contracts from Dimensions UK to Dimensions Cymru. One is for closer to home scheme for people with learning disabilities, and the other is a general supported living framework scheme, again for people with learning disabilities. The second part of report concerns a third sector service level agreement entered into originally with Havel. Havel has merged with two other organisations. Three organisations have come together to become Adferiad Cymru in order to meet their business objectives. That's Wakada and Cais, as well as Havel. And the report requests that the contract that is in place with Havel is novated to Adferiad in the new company form. Due diligence in the form of the passing of the original PQQ requirements has been carried out, and no issues or concerns were identified with the new entities. There is provision in all agreements to novate contracts subject to the consent of the Cabinet. So I draw Cabinet's attention to the recommendations in the report set out at 9.1. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to move this report. It seems pretty standard, and it's nice to know that organisations are reacting to our forward-thinking legislation in Wales. I'm confident that the due diligence has been done to ensure that these contracts are as good as they were, and look forward to them continuing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Burnett. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations, please?
Yeah, second, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations? Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the second report, the Corporate Directive for Social Services and Wellbeing, and that is on a proposed variation to the older People's Partnership Agreement within the Community Resources Team with Cwmtaf Morgana University Health Board. Claire, please. Claire, apologies. I think you're muted. It's okay.
Apologies.
That's okay. You're unmuted now.
Apologies, Leader. I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and the purpose of this report is to request approval from Cabinet to vary the current overarching partnership agreement for integrated community services with Cwmtaf Morgana University Health Board to include provision for a pilot scheme utilising healthcare support workers within the community resource team. The intention of the pilot scheme is to seek to mitigate the current risks, which we've already mentioned within the Cabinet meeting this afternoon, linked to reduced service capacity due to the challenges in the recruitment of social care worker posts and vacant posts within social care establishments within the county borough. This is a real opportunity, I think, because of the long history that we have here in Bridgend in terms of integrated health and social care services, working very closely together to provide healthcare and support by the right person at the right time to people, to keep them as independently as possible, living in their own homes in the county borough. The need for care and support at home is increasing, so despite those challenges in recruiting into the social care sector, as noted in the paper, we're providing between 7 and 8% more care and support to people at home in August of this year than we were at the same time in August 2020. But there are real challenges across the whole foundation economy, and particularly in social care roles, not just in Bridgend, but across the whole of Wales and indeed in across the UK. So there's been an opportunity, building on the success of integrated working that we already have here in Bridgend, to think innovatively and creatively, and to expand the health element of the workforce in our integrated teams. These workers will support the delivery of the health duties in the short-term reablement teams. And this is a pilot because our working assumption is that these posts will reduce the need for long-term social care services by being part of that reablement service. And as was noted in the annual report presented to Cabinet earlier, 80% of people who benefit from reablement services experience a reduction in their long-term care needs, and therefore take the pressure off the wider social care sector. We will be refreshing the Section 33 agreement to come into the new financial year, so that sets a realistic timescale for the success of the pilot to be considered, and for us to consider whether to build these posts substantively into the legal agreement with the Health Board. So I draw Cabinet attention to the recommendation, again set out in 9.1 of the report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Claire, Councillor Burnett, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, happy to move this report. I think it's an innovative way of trying to solve the situation that we're in. It doesn't matter who's employing the staff, as long as they're all working, they're in employment and they're working towards the same aim. And after visit to Tremor Moor. I wouldn't know who was health and who was social care, but they were absolutely united in their purpose and in supporting our residents and keeping them out of hospital, in their homes and living independently as long as possible. So fully support this, and I hope it works, because situation we need some sort of miracle, don't we?
Thank you for that. That's a point very well made by Councillor Burnett. It's a fundamental strength of our system in Bridgend that, due to the very close integrated working that we have, that we are able to employ people through joint integrated teams, and then they can provide that seamless service whoever they are employed by. It is secondary. The key feature is that they work together to support people whoever they are employed by, and that is a real strength of the system here in Bridgend, and has enabled us to react in a different way to the way that other places have had to respond to the difficulties we are all facing. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation, please?
Second.
Everyone in agreement, please? Everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Claire will now receive the first report of the Corporate Director for Communities, and it is an update on the Cosy Corner site and the tourism attractor destination funding for Cosy Corner. Janine, please.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Leader. And for the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director for Communities. So the report that you have as item 13 today, Leader and Cabinet, is an update, a progress update on the Cosy Corner scheme, on the funding that we've secured through the Tourism Attractor Destination Grant from Visit Wales, and to look at what steps we need to do to take the project forward. And the second thing really is to accept the offer of funding that we've received, the £1 million offer of funding we've received, and enter into the required agreements. Now, section 3 of this report sets out the background to Cosy Corner, and you will recall Cabinet have seen a number of reports now about the Cosy Corner piece and the redevelopment of it. But in short, really, just to remind colleagues of what's in the report, it was to look at the Cosy Corner development site and improve its use by community organisations such as the Sea Cadets. It was to improve the local economy and tourism offer that we've got in that area, including small retail and some startup spaces. It was to improve that area for marina users in particular, such as storage and changing facilities, and also for the wider community benefit, looking at changing places facilities, looking at free children's play, public seating, public realm, landscaping and an events area. So really a real community focus in the area. Now, section 4 of the report sets out the current situation and what the proposal is. And if you bear with me, I'd like to take you through some of the detail here, because we have done quite a lot of due diligence on this project, and I think it's important that Cabinet endorse the approach we've taken. So proposals in section 4 were submitted to Visit Wales and WEFO in January of this year, January 21. And they were based on the principles outlined in section 3 of the report we've just discussed. So we asked for £1 million of TAD funding from Visit Wales to do work at Cosy Corner. In February 21, we received confirmation back that we'd completed 6 of the 9 criteria, that they were happy with that, but they wanted more information from us to complete their assessment. And the additional information they wanted was to test value for money, test finance and test compliance. They also requested information on our match funding, because part of this grant we need to match fund the scheme. Now, in March this year, Cabinet, you authorised myself to proceed at risk with developing the remaining information that we needed for the bid to WEFO. And we used 384,000 of match funding that we had allocated for this in order to secure this additional £1 million. In May 21, we concluded a procurement exercise and we appointed architects to progress the project forward. Now, they produced all the information that was required for WEFO, for the funders, and they took the project to REBA Stage 3, quite a high level of design of the project. Now, what this was critical for, to take it to REBA 3, was to give us greater cost certainty for the scheme, to confirm how much match funding BCBC had to put into the scheme, to confirm all of the project deliverables, as in what it is are we going to get from the scheme, and to give a delivery profile. And all those things are incredibly important for us to ensure that we're making the right investments. So by April, we used a £500,000 earmarked reserve that was put onto the project and approved by Cabinet and Council. So at that point, the budget for this scheme was now 1.88 million. That was 1 million from WEFO if we received the grant and 880,000 from BCBC. We then undertook an updated cost plan, and why that was important is because the market conditions have changed post-pandemic. What we're now finding is that prices are increasing on all material costs, and there are sometimes delays in the building trade as well. So we had to ensure that we put sufficient contingency into our scheme at Cosy Corner to ensure that we could afford all eventualities when we go to tender. And what we did here was we took 230,000 in August from the Strategic Regeneration Fund that we have set up. But this doesn't require additional Cabinet and or Council approval because it's already in the capital programme. And now we've had really great news that WEFO and Welsh Government have now confirmed the offer of the £1 million towards the project, which is wonderful news. So the total project cost is now 2.114 million, and that's set out in paragraph 4.11 of your report. So 1 million from Welsh Government and 1.114 million from BCBC towards the scheme. So now what we are looking for, Leader, is we're seeking authority to proceed with accepting this grant offer of funding and to progress the project. There are some very, very tight deadlines on this project, unfortunately. It has to be completed within 14 months by December next year, 22, so some very tight timescales. Now, should you be minded not to accept the grant offer today, what we would have to do is to redesign the scheme substantially, and we would have abortive costs which we would need to meet. But I'm sure that won't be the case, hopefully, Leader and Cabinet. So if I take you to section 9 of the recommendations, the first recommendation, first one and only recommendation is to authorise or delegate authority to myself, the Chief Legal and Finance Officers, to accept that £1 million TAG funding and to progress the delivery of this Cosy Corner project as part of the Visit Wales programme. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that update, Janine. I will bring in Councillor Smith, then Councillor Baldwin. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just to remind participants and listeners and viewers that this Cosy Corner project has got a history of its own. It is separate from the wider Salt Lake plans, but it will serve to integrate those plans with other projects, such as the harbourside buildings, which give us a bit of a track record in regeneration when we've got control over the land and the funding. And it'll also integrate the Eastern Promenade improvements with the Esplanade, which again has benefited from improvements, including the new sea defences. Even though originally we were hoping that Cosy Corner would be developed in a different way, I think we've made a virtue out of a necessity, and I'd like to thank Janine and the team in regeneration. When I say that, it sounds as if we've got hundreds of people in regeneration slaving away on this sort of thing, but it is a very, very small but very, very expert team. I'd like to thank the Welsh European Funding Office for ensuring that the European funding doesn't go to waste. It is a very precious piece of European funding. I dare say that for the foreseeable future, it's the last bit of capital investment which will carry the blue and gold flag by law, because that's the agreement with European funding. We going to go into a placemaking consultation with the people of Porthcawl over the next couple of months. I think there's been consultation, and quite effective consultation, on Cosy Corner, actually, with the groups who we've been talking to, really in the build-up to the formal placemaking. So we have had plenty of representations of what people think ought to be included at Cosy Corner and what oughtn't be included. The leader and myself made a personal pledge at a very early stage to the Sea Cadets that we would look after them, and I think we've incorporated something there at Cosy Corner which will be a great value to them and great value to the town as well. And I think that the vision for Cosy Corner is something which will be incredibly useful for Porthcawl as a destination and as a tourist attractor, which is the name of the European Union project. So I'm very pleased to recommend that we adopt this report, and in a way it's a good thing that we have got close deadlines on this, and we need a shortened timeline because the Cosy Corner saga now has gone on long enough. It's time that we produce something, and I think it's going to be something which we can be proud of and which will fit in very nicely into the street scene in Porthcawl. We've got some ambitions there for a covered area and something to complement existing facilities around there for the harbour master and so on. So it's going to be a very useful and a very attractive part of Porthcawl, as Cosy Corner always has been. And I don't like using cliches, but sometimes you use cliches because they're true. And it's true to say that Cosy Corner is iconic and will continue to be iconic.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. You move in the recommendation as well. And we'll bring in Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, and I'm going to second this report and thank all our team at BCBC for the exceptional work that has gone into saving this project and getting it one step closer to being on site and seeing the fantastic results. I look forward to it. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baldwin, and I certainly look forward to it as well. It's a very exciting opportunity, and it may be a cliche, but you're absolutely right, it's true. It's certainly an iconic site, and we can maximise the huge potential that is there at Cosy Corner with the vision and plan that we have for the site, and we will continue to move because we have to move at a great speed on this project. It's really not much time at all that we have to deliver on it, and we will do, I'm sure, our level best to deliver it within the extremely tight timescales that we have to work within. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please?
Agreed.
Thank you, colleagues. Now receive the second report to the Corporate Director of Communities, and that is on the Infuse programme, please, Janine.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Yeah, this is quite an interesting report. It's to update on the developments of the Cardiff Capital Region's Challenge Fund and their new Infuse programme, and to request from yourselves approval to enter into a partnership agreement, because Monmouthshire Council are leading on this on behalf of our region, our 10 local authorities. So the background to this is set out in section 3 of the report, but just in short, let me give you a brief explanation, if I may. Back in October last year, 2020, the Cabinet of CCR, the Capital Region, approved a £10 million challenge fund to focus on local wealth rebuilding in post-COVID times. And what they wanted to do was to solve challenges that we had and impact economically on our communities and look at potential commercial opportunities. So by applying innovation to big challenges that we were left with post-COVID, we could promote innovative solutions and improvements in our communities. Now, the themes that emerged in which they wanted to concentrate on with 3 areas really. The first area was to accelerate our decarbonisation agenda. Now, we all know how important that is for the 2030 net zero target that we have for the council, and indeed in the next couple of months our 2030 strategy and action plan will be coming in front of you, Cabinet, for you to approve. So some of the things that the Challenge Fund wants to look at is, are there any innovative solutions around the flood agenda, around transport itself, decarbonisation of vehicles, etc., and also around the public estate. The second area they want to look at is community cohesion, looking at town centres in particular and high streets and what we can do to improve them. And the third area they're particularly interested in is well-being and looking at food and health and whether there's any innovation we can introduce into that agenda. Now, the Infuse programme itself, that is, dare I say, almost a training, an innovative programme that's been designed to sit alongside the Challenge Fund. And it's to look at designing innovation skills and capacity for staff within the region so that learning can be spread and can be scaled and brought back to local authorities in the CCR region. And it's worth about £3.2 million in terms of training needs. Now, section 4 of this report outlines what the Infuse programme is, but in short, really, it will be led and managed by Monmouthshire Council. The 10 local authorities in the Cardiff City region will enter into a partnership agreement to be part of this Infuse programme, and our contribution at BCBC, it will only be in officer time if we give up officers to go and take part in this programme. It's planned to run a number of activities for 3 years up until December 2023, and in essence it will comprise of 6 cohorts of officers for 3 to 6 months, and it'll target around 120 officers in our organisation and across the region. So what will happen is officers within our local authority and others will come together in a group and will look at a collaborative approach to solving a problem. May it be, what vehicles are we going to use? How are we going to decarbonise our council fleet going forward? Just an example. They will then develop the solution for that as far as they can, and then use that to apply for funding from the Challenge Fund. The programme has been developed with the region, but importantly, it's supported very well. It's so supported by Pwlb, which is the Wales Public Service Innovation Lab. It's supported by Cardiff University, and it's also supported by Nesta, which is the UK Innovation Foundation. So really, Leader, what we're looking for today in the recommendations is to note the progress of the Challenge Fund and the Infuse programme, and to delegate authority to myself as the Corporate Director, to the Chief Finance and Legal Officers to accept the invitation to be part of the Infuse programme, to accept that we sign the agreement with Monmouth, and to look at what officers we could nominate and what challenges we could find solutions for moving forward. It's quite an innovative approach, and hopefully it's one that as a Cabinet you would support. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks so much for that, Janine. Very interesting initiative and programme. Deputy Leader, please.
Yeah, happy to move the report, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And looking at the challenge areas that they're looking at taking a proactive approach towards, especially the 2030 decarbonisation, and how we can look to improving our fleet as well as food poverty as well. I'm more than happy to second this report and look forward to the feedback and potential solutions that our officers and cohorts come back with after participating in this programme.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin, and for making that point around the many challenges we face currently, and the need for us to make the space for our staff to help identify some of the innovative solutions that will be required. Because if there's one certainty around the current set of challenges, is that we do not have all of the solutions yet. We may not have most of the solutions yet. They are to be identified, and they will require us to work in different ways, and they'll certainly require our staff to come up with our staff who are on the front line and working on the ground to come up with some of those solutions. And this programme is about enabling those solutions to be identified. So I'm pleased to support the initiative as well. And it's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please?
Great.
Thank you. The next report of the Corporate Director for Communities is on the Caira Heat Scheme. Janine, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, the purpose of this report really is to update on recent activity on the Caira Heat Scheme, to seek approval from you Cabinet for a change in scope, and to seek approval for us to submit a reprofile of the project to WEFO. Now, I think we're all very well aware of the background to this very, very innovative scheme that we've been trying to progress here, a very innovative project. The background is set out in section 3. So the idea behind this project is to extract heat from water in the former coal mines in the community of Caira, to provide a resource to properties where we can use a network of pipes to the properties and boost the water by ground source heat pumps in order that we can provide low cost decarbonised heat. It's very, very innovative scheme, and it has been subject to several challenges along the way, most of which are unfortunately out of our control. But what I want to say though is that this is a very innovative approach to heating, and it's also a demonstrator project for us, one of the first in the UK involving mine water. And as such, it's fully funded by WEFO and Welsh Government and others. It's funded to the value of £9.7 million, and our contribution at BCBC is less than 0.01% of the scheme total. To date, our contribution from the 10 million has been £50,000. So it is, in all intents and purposes, a demonstrator scheme fully funded for us. Now, some of the challenges that we've had with this project have been, how can we use the mine water commercially as a resource to heat the homes? How can we secure the right amount of customers for the heat network? And how can we create an affordable and viable project? Now, because this is a Pathfinder project and because nobody has done this before, you know, we really are breaking new ground here, moving forward. And it's important that we want to do that as a demonstrator project so we can unlock the future of decarbonised heat as part of the 2030 agenda. Now, in June this year, Cabinet, you will recall that we brought a report to you detailing what the options were for the project. And the decision was taken by yourselves to proceed with what we call a blended option, a basket of schemes. So what you had agreed that we would look at is a mine water demonstrator that served Kyra Primary School, that we would look at providing alternative heat sources for homes on the Tudor estate in Kyra, and that we would look at a private wire connection for electricity from a nearby wind farm. Now, section 4 of this report sets out what the current situation is and what has happened since we've looked at those options. So we've undertaken quite a lot of further work for this project in order that we can go back to WEFO and yourselves with what we think is the best outcome. But we have come across 4 major challenges, and these affect the viability and deliverability of the project. And unfortunately, none of these are in our control for BCBC. Let me take you through these challenges, if I may, and they start from section 4.4 of your report. The first challenge is business rates via Welsh Government. Now, for our heat scheme to proceed, we need an exemption from Welsh Government from paying business rates. That would need to be applied to this project. And no such exemption for heat schemes, innovative heat schemes, exists currently in Wales. Now, we do have exemptions in Wales for innovative hydropower schemes, but there isn't any for heat networks. Now, what that means is if we apply a business rates levy to this project, I'm afraid at this point in time, it makes it financially unviable. But what we want to do is, because we're a pathfinder with energy schemes, we want to look to positively lobby Welsh Government about this and look if we can get an exemption made on these heat schemes. We're one of the first local authorities in Wales to do this. We certainly won't be the last. There will be other local authorities looking at this and will be coming in our wake, and they will be experiencing these problems. So it'd be really good if we could start that dialogue early, because we've all got a 2030 decarbonisation agenda, and one of the most important parts of those is energy and heat. So challenge 2 is domestic customer sign up to the scheme. Now, what we've realised is we need about 100 homes within that Tudor estate to take part in the project in order to make it viable. Now, we undertook an engagement exercise on the estate, and we had some help from Valleys to Coast, 2 other RSL who operate in the area. And it was fair to say there was some interest in the project, because no doubt it will help with fuel poverty and decarbonisation. But there's a very tight timescale on this project turnaround, and we feel it would be difficult, I'm afraid, to agree to get 100 properties in such a limited time in order to make this project viable commercially. Challenge 3 is meeting the June 2023 delivery timescale, because the majority of this fund is from WEFO. So the money is European and it has to be spent. The project has to be fully committed by June 2023, built and operational. So in order to do that, to secure some exemption on business rates, to sign up 100 homes, etc., it would be incredibly difficult to do that and then tender, construct and put the project together. And challenge 4 really is very similar. It's about delivering a financially viable project And again, it depends on full business rates relief and guaranteeing we get the correct number of properties coming forward. So if I take you, please, Leader and Cabinet, to paragraph 4.8 of the report. So we've been looking at what are the options for taking this project forward. And there's only two options that are suitable now. Bearing in mind, this is a fully funded project. The funding is from WEFO, it's not from BCBC. It will assist us in decarbonisation, and it will definitely assist us in fuel poverty. And it's also a pathfinder for Wales and the UK. So we do really want to go ahead with the project. So option A will be to close the project down. And at this stage, that's not what we would recommend for all of those reasons I've just outlined. The second option would be if we remove the Tudor estate heat element currently until we resolve any business rates in the future. And we just deliver at this point the mine water element of the scheme. So this would be powered with the private wire from the wind farm, and it would provide lower cost electricity to the heat pump at Cairo Primary School for the energy. So we still would be proceeding with the private wire and the mine water demonstrator on the scheme. Now, if I take you to section 8 of the financial implications in the report, you will see that the total scheme cost is 9.7 million, and that's what we've had approved by WEFO. And if you look at the way this table is split up, you will see that 7.2 million is ERDF grants, and that's the European component. Other grants are 895,000, and you'll see 1.5 million as a BCBC contribution there. But what I must explain is that 1.5 BCBC contribution is made up in the main of Welsh Government monies and monies from Scottish Power, because they wanted to be part of any pilot moving forward. There's very, very little contribution from Bridgend. It is a fully funded project going forward. So what I would like to recommend then, please, Leader and Cabinet, is that we would like to move forward with option B, which is to still continue with the mine water demonstrator and the private wire, and to reprofile this programme, because it's quite clear it won't cost in the region of 9.7 million now. So we want to reprofile this figure and send it back to WEFO. And we want to look at, in the future, possibly including households on the Tudor estate, but not in this first phase. But what we would like to do is to present back at Cabinet at a future date the outcomes of the reprofile and outline our next steps. So the recommendations I would draw you to, please, in section 9 of the report are to approve changes to the heat scheme as we have set out in this report at option B, and to delegate authority to myself as the corporate director, the chief officer, legal and finance, to agree and put together a new WEFO reprofile based on this amended scheme as we've described. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Janine. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. And it would be remiss of me to not mention the work that Councillor Richard Young put into the Cairo mine water, and the fact that he never failed to tell us about how much it was a demonstrator and innovative project. So I want to thank him for that, because the words are ingrained in my being. Cut me open and you will see Cairo mine water running through the middle of me. I don't think option A is an option for us, because for the very fact that this is a demonstrator project, this is a learning process for us and for the rest of, well, not just Wales, is it? This is for everywhere where we can actually extract mine water. So I think option B is the only option, and recognising that we need to continue to work with Valleys to Coast and other social landlords that are in the area to make sure that we can maximise opportunities for those that are suffering from fuel poverty. But this sits very much at the heart of our 2030 decarbonisation agenda. So I'm happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin, and you are right to highlight the work of Councillor Young, and of course he still is playing a pivotal role in our response to the climate emergency through chairing that all important group that is looking at our how we and we will achieve it net zero by 2030, net zero carbon. Do I have a seconder for the recommendations, please, on this scheme? Thank you, Deputy Leader, and no doubt we'll continue to benefit from the learning, and it is very valuable learning from the scheme, and that's why we had universities on board from the outset.
Absolutely.
Because we needed to ensure that learning was shared. It was a pioneering project, and often when you're trialing new techniques and activities and projects for the very first time, you do not get the outcome that you first anticipate. And this has been the result of this scheme, but it is still progressing. It's just progressing in a different way.
A different way.
To that plan that we had initially, but there's still very close involvement of our partners in higher education and research.
And absolutely, Leader, if I may add as well, the Coal Authority are instrumental in this as well, because what they want to do, of course, they want to look at applications for this across the whole of the UK, particularly in the north of England, etc., where there were a lot of coal fields and a legacy of coal mining. You know, they're very, very interested to see if this works on this demonstrator project and to use this more widely as a form of decarbonised heat. So not just the university who want to look at this as an innovative project, but very, very much the Coal Authority as well, and local authorities in Northern England and Scotland.
And of course, we will and are taking up with Welsh Government the current position of rates on schemes like this, because that does make a difference to the viability of this type of scheme. Yes. And again, given the commitment, and there's real commitment there from Welsh Government, they have demonstrated it in several significant fields through investment and through policy choices. They are committed to responding to climate change. But I think this also needs to be reviewed and reconsidered, the position around rates, because that does affect the financial viability, and that will always be a factor in any scheme. So we'll also take that up at a political level with colleagues in Welsh Government, because they're as committed to this agenda as we are. And that could make a difference to future projects that we are continuing to drive forward locally in Bridgend County Borough. Well, thank you for that, Janine. We'll now move on to the next report that you are presenting to us, the final report, and that's on the extension, the proposed extension to the contract for bus services 65 and 70. Janine, please.
Oh, thank you, Leader. Yes, hopefully quite a simple report to finish with. This report is for you, Cabinet, is to see whether you would approve the modification of an existing contract for a further 12-month extension to 2 services that operate regionally and through Bridgend. It's Service 65, which is Bridgend to Talbot Green, which goes through via Hillique, and Service 70, which is Bridgend to Cummer, which goes via Maesteg. That this is in accordance with the contract procedure rules 3.3.6. Now, bus services 65 and 70, I've just explained, are funded via Welsh Government via the Bus Services Support Grant. And as part of the pandemic piece, it was recognised how important public transport was. And because these are regional services, considered regional services, and they operate in other local authorities, they route through quite a lot of major settlements and they're very busy. They have been supported throughout the pandemic by this Bus Emergency Services scheme of Welsh Government. Now, the current contract to subsidise that scheme, to pay for that scheme, expires on the 31st of October this year, later on this month. Now, it's clear that bus travel has been severely affected by the pandemic, with not just passenger numbers, but enhanced cleaning regimes that are required on buses and transport, and also the social distancing piece. And what is very clear is that the transport market has been severely disrupted by this, and the viability of the transport market has been affected. So in order that we avoid disruption to these very important services, it's proposed that we extend the current contract that we have for a further 12 months and just apply an indexed link increase to the current contract. Now, the cost of all of this will be borne completely by the Welsh Government's Bus Services Support Grant. So in essence, it's a 12-month extension under that Welsh Government scheme. Now, the Council's CPR rules 3.3.6 provide a basis for us that existing contracts can be modified without a new procurement being provided, and that is outlined in section 4.4 of the report. As long as the value is within the threshold set out in the regulations, that is 10% of the initial contract for source and supply and 15% of the contract value of the initial contract. As long as it is within those parameters, we can go ahead with an extension. Now, the initial contract was for £2.3 million to subsidise those two services, and it's proposed that we increase it by 187,000 to reflect inflation and indexation, so that's less than 10% overall. So if I take you please to recommendation 9, Leader, and that's to approve the modification of this bus service contract in accordance with CPR rule 3.3.6, which will allow us to put in place a 12-month extension to service 65 and to service number 70 from the 1st of November of this year. Thank you, Leader.
Thanks very much, Janine. Councillor Baldwin, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm not going to say much other than the fact that we're being asked to continue to support these by Welsh Government through their funding. So I'm more than happy to move that report and to accept their funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation, please? It's been moved by Councillor Baldwin.
Move. Second, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and we certainly welcome that investment in bus services by Welsh Government. It's been essential to keep in many of the bus services going during the pandemic and in this transition period as well, because they are still transitioning and have not yet returned to the levels of usage that were in place before the pandemic, and that clearly has an impact on the viability of many of the services. Thank you very much, Janine. That's your last report, so you can take a break now, have a glass of water, and hopefully the police will not return to your door.
Hope not.
Thank you very much. So the next item is a report of the monitoring officer on the forward work programme for Cabinet, Council and Scrutiny. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of the recording, my name is Kelly Watson, Chief Officer, Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy. The purpose of this report today, members, is to seek your approval for items to be included on the forward work programme for Cabinet for the period the 1st of November 2021 to the 28th of February 2022. It's also for Cabinet to note the Council and the overview and scrutiny forward work programmes for the same period. Members will find those forward work programmes in the appendices attached to your report. I would ask members to note that the overview and scrutiny forward work programme, as every year, is subject to change depending on the publication of the local government settlement by the Welsh Government. Members, unless you have any queries, I would take you to the recommendations at paragraph 9. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Kelly. Councillor Patel, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Kelly. I'm sure members here are used to seeing this report. It's important for transparency that it comes before us and is in the public domain. Obviously, the scrutiny committees and scrutiny chairs have been consulted and they've actually produced the programme for what they will be reviewing. So, yeah, I've got nothing further to add. So, yeah, happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Everyone in agreement? Everyone in agreement, please?
Agreed.
So the second report we have today is from is again another report from the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory Services, HR and Corporate Policy. And it's on the Shared Regulatory Services Annual Report 2020 to 2021. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. We've invited Dave Holland to the meeting today, so I'm going to hand straight over to Dave and he can take members through the report and then we can both answer any queries you've got. Thank you, Leader.
The warmest of welcomes to Dave. It's very good to see you, Dave, and I'm not, well, I was about to say not to talk about COVID-19, but I'm sure you will talk about COVID-19, but you will also talk about, I am quite sure, about all the other critical services that shared regulatory services have continued to provide even during this most difficult of periods. So over to you, please, Dave.
Thank you, Leader. Hopefully you can hear me and see me, as I can't see myself on screen. But for the purposes of recording, my name is Dave Holland. I am the head of the Shared Regulatory Service that provides services to Bridgend Council, Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan. Leader, I'm with you this afternoon just to apprise Cabinet of the Shared Regulatory Services Annual Report. Councillor Patel and Councillor David Lewis received this report back in June, and our joint working agreement places an onus on us to bring it to each Cabinet so that Cabinet and all of Bridgend's elected members are able to see some of the work the SRS does on their behalf. I had the good fortune to be at the corporate overview scrutiny on the 7th of October this month. Spent time with scrutiny members talking about what we do. We did there talk at some length about some of the coronavirus work. In this report, I haven't brought it out in the main body because much of it is in Appendix 1, the efforts that officers have made over the 12-month period of April 2020 to March 21. You know, and unless we forget, in April 2020, we went into a complete lockdown. We closed the pubs. We were very popular with the locals in Bridgend for closing the pubs and making sure they stayed closed. And it just went through a wave of unprecedented actions where our civil liberties were controlled by government, and what we could do, couldn't do, couldn't go into shops without face masks and many other things like that. Throughout that, you know, I set out the background in 4.1 about the sickness attendance levels of the staff were fantastic. You know, they grasped that challenge. They went on to deal with some very difficult things. We have some 30 extra staff in the service who have been brought in just to deal with some of the public health issues. And I know that Matthew Jones corresponds with many of you about his enforcement work, but behind the scenes, the work with schools, in our health and safety teams, the work at care homes has been spectacular. And you know, I am extremely proud to lead those officers and the work that they do. In the report, Leader, I flagged that the traditional accountability measures that we have around food hygiene establishments, about bringing empty homes back into reuse, about some of the air quality work that we're trying to achieve around Park Street and so on, and some of the prosecutions. We've hit some of the rogue traders in Bridgend particularly hard this year, which is very pleasing. And after the delay in the court scheduling, we have put a number of people inside for ripping off some of our members of our community. So the report, Leader, is there really for noting the activities that go on. As I say, the purpose of bringing it here is so that all the Bridgend members will be able to see what goes on in the SRS. And then I'm just able to take any questions that Cabinet may have, if there's any.
Thank you very much for that, Dave. I'm sure Councillor Patel will want to come in as the lead member. And can I once again convey my appreciation, and I can't describe my appreciation to the work that your officers have undertaken during this period, because we made them, or national governments made them, very unpopular with certain certain sections of our society at certain stages when we did have to close lots of businesses, and we had to then, even when they were open, we've had to put in place very severe restrictions for good, very good and important reasons, but nevertheless they've had a profound impact on people's way of life and the way that business operated. And I know how hard our officers have worked to ensure that they've worked with businesses and supported businesses. And as has always been the case with our services, enforcement action is the last resort, isn't it? We work through education, awareness raising, always are the first steps. But where we've had to take action, we've taken action, and that will continue to be the case as well. And I'm particularly pleased to see that we have been able to prosecute criminals, and they are criminals who have exploited some of those vulnerable people in society, and let that be a warning to anyone else who thinks that they can for example, take thousands of pounds from an elderly person for a job that they haven't done properly, because we will come after you and we will take action and we will take you to court, and the courts will act, and the sanctions are severe, and that continues to be the case whether there's a pandemic here or not. Our trading standards officers are continuing to act in that way, and also in terms of other standards like food standards, we have not compromised on that. We will not compromise on that, and just because there's a pandemic, and there's been a pandemic and there continues to be those restrictions, it does not mean that all the other standards that we have in place do not apply, and we will apply them rigorously. Councillor Patel, did you want to add anything?
Just my thanks to the teams and the staff that have worked tirelessly. It's a busy service, and it covers multiple areas in the public realm, from air quality, animal welfare, as well as the trading standards. And I think the fact that performance so good. Just goes to show you, your leadership, actually, Dave, and the fact that you've that you've made staff feel comfortable and confident to carry out their duties amongst the backdrop of a pandemic. So yeah, I think I would just like to echo what the leader has said, really. It's a great service to oversee. It's broad, as well as it's a high performing service that's well regarded by multiple levels of government. And I look at the staff sickness as well as an indicator as to staff well-being, and I think it's one of the service areas that I think you always say is above. If you take the average of that service area, it's actually better than the averages of the 3 councils that it represents or is made up of. So again, I just think there's so much in this report and in the annual report that I could talk about, but I won't. I'm conscious of the time. But yeah, just thanks, and thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I'm going to have to echo that, because I don't know if this is your last annual report to us, Dave, but if it is, and it is, and that is public, then my personal thanks to you, because it is a model service. It is exemplary, the service we provide, and I don't say that about all our services. I have to be honest, but I'll say it about your service. And I think much of that is down to the personal leadership that you have shown and the culture that you've helped to create. So we really are appreciative of that. And when you do retire, it'll be a very well-deserved retirement. But we'll probably have you back, because all the best officers end up coming back anyway after they retire.
Retirement's overrated, leader. That's what I keep telling Dave.
Very overrated. So thank you to you, Dave, and thank you to all your staff. And please, if you could convey that, would be much appreciated. And it's good to see you again. And thank you for the comprehensive report. All the best.
Before you go, Dave, I just wanted to say, can you also congratulate the animal welfare teams on the Pwlb Awards, which I know we're putting out a press release later, but yeah, I think again, animal welfare, I think, is really it matters a lot to residents in Bridgend, and the fact that we've got the Pwlb Awards every single year, I think, since they've been created is again an amazing achievement.
It is. So those awards are awards organised by the RSPCA, obviously a very highly regarded and respected organisation, the leading animal welfare organisation in the UK, and that's again an independent testament to the quality of service that's delivered by a dedicated group of professionals. And I have to say, in animal welfare, it's a very small group of individuals as well, isn't it, Dave? It's a very small service that's provided, but they still provide a first-class service. So thank you.
Yeah, it is, leader, and the RSPCA recognise much of what we do with dogs and whatever. But you will be only too aware of what we do chasing other 4-legged animals in the borough. So, and in this period, we also had a very successful action against him as well.
Yeah, and that is good news. Yeah. Excellent news. Thank you again, Dave. All the best. The next report that we have is a confidential report. So what we will need to do now is we will need our monitoring officer to take us through the process of agreeing to exempt the public from this part of the meeting. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet, you will be aware that there is a general assumption that local government will conduct their business in an open and transparent way, and that the public have access to the information before them when they're making those decisions. However, under the legislation, the Local Government Act 1972, there are exemptions to that rule, and the information contained in the next report before you is covered by those exemptions as it relates to the business affairs of various organisations. In these circumstances, Cabinet must apply the public interest test and must determine whether the need to maintain the confidentiality at this stage of the process outweighs the general principle that we make the decisions publicly. I would remind Cabinet that if you do decide to make the information exempt at this stage, it may be released further down the line when the process has concluded. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you for that, Kelly. Do I have a mover that we exclude the public from this part of the meeting in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972 and subsequent variations of that by the Local Government Order 2007?
Move.
Second, all agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you, and it's clear to us that the public interest test has been applied to due to the commercial information within the report. So we'll now formally exclude. Are there any